Hello and welcome to the BACCF podcast series. I'm your host, Marson, and I'm joined here by my good friend and co-host, Carlos.
Thank you very much, Marson. Today, we have the pleasure to have here with us the Honorable County Commissioner for District 12 of Miami-Dade County, Juan Carlos J.C. Bermudez, a respected community leader, a distinguished public servant and elected official, and somebody that I have the pleasure to call my personal friend for over 10 years. Welcome, County Commissioner J.C. Bermudez.
Well, thank you, Carlos. It's great to see you again and see Marson again, and great to see you on a personal level, obviously, too, and our friends from the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, who you guys, I've said this before, so I'm going to say it publicly. You're one of the most active and important chambers here in Miami-Dade County. So, and there's a lot of chambers in Miami-Dade County, as you know, a lot of binational chambers of commerce, but you were probably at the top of the list of the ones that is a great product for your members and great product for the community too, because putting people together with such a great trade partner as Brazil for the state of Florida and Miami-Dade County is a great thing.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. Thank you again for spending the time with us. We're happy to have you connect with the Brazilian community.
Definitely. And I promise that I'm not going to try my Portuguese at all, because if I say something I could be wrong, and then I don't want to get in trouble, so I'll behave.
You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Let's start with, and you and I have had hours of conversations about this. We could cover the whole 30 minutes just talking about this. But for those who don't know you, tell us, or tell our audience a little more about your background and what got you into the public life.
Yeah, well, I came from Cuba at the age of 3, went to school at University of Miami, law school at Notre Dame, came back, was always active in the community, did a lot of stuff with human rights with Cuba and other nations, but in Doral in particular, I was very unhappy with what a county commissioner was doing to the community of Doral, along with some of the members in what was then an active community in what was called West Dade at the time. And I just put my name in and learned a lesson about politics and decided to get very involved because despite the fact that most of the community supported me, it turned out to be that the county commissioner weighed much more heavily than the community, which I thought was not proper at the time. And eventually we started an organization called One Doral, and One Doral led to when we became a city. The residents asked me to run for mayor, which I did, and became the first mayor of Doral. And I've always been active, and that was a great experience, to start a city from scratch. There's not too many people that get an opportunity to do that. Left back to the private sector, had to come back, and had an opportunity to serve with your wife when we came back. And in a period where Doral went through a very difficult time, and the residents felt that we had to go back to the reason why we were founded. So, and now when the opportunity arose to run for county commission in 2022, took the opportunity to do that. It's a little bit different, but it's still fulfilling. And I think the most important thing is I've always been involved in the community, whether on active on boards, whether on the professional side, on the political side, on the community side, and helping build the city of Doral, and now working to try to make Miami-Dade County a better place is something that for a 3-year-old kid that came here that was a political refugee from Cuba, it certainly is a great experience.
It was great, and you have served and continue to serve in leadership positions, representing many parts of the community. What can you say are the experiences that helped shape your approach to leadership and community? What were maybe the stories behind driving you to where you are now?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I think before I ever ran for the city of Doral Community Council, then mayor, I was very involved in human rights, like I said. But when I came back from law school, then commissioner or councilman, but eventually County Mayor Alex Pinellas had named me to a board in the City of Hialeah Retirement and Trustee Board, which was very interesting to see how politics works up front with the unions and, with government. I then was County Commissioner Miguel Diaz-Zaportilla named me to the Hispanic Affairs Advisory Board, which gave me a chance to visit so many communities in South Florida that make up South Florida and see how we could help them, not only from the perspective of culture, but also from business, which was one of the roles. So I think that and the work for human rights, which I went all around the world, has been very interesting. I think it's taught me how to deal with people, read people sometimes, understand the complexity of different forms of government, whether in our republic, which is a federal republic, and then you have the state government, your county government, local government. But even in other countries I visited, I had an opportunity to be in Mexico City with a conference with the Partido Acción Nacional, PAN, before they actually before Fox won the election, which was historic because the PRI had been in power for so many years, that you get to see meet a lot of very interesting people. And I think the one thing that I would tell you that I've seen from all great leaders, certainly in business and in politics, is you have to be true to yourself. You've got to be consistent with your value system. The minute you try to be somebody you're not, people will see through you, and you will not be an effective leader, whether you're a man or a woman, whether you're young or you're old.
Well, that's why you're a great leader.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this. As Miami-Dade County grows, and we've seen how much growth it's had the past 20, 30 years, but as it continues to grow, how do you see the role of local government supporting and growing together with the business communities like ours?
I think it's critical. One thing I've said to the business community, and I think both of you have heard me say it before, but I've said it the other day to somebody who was very prominent in Miami-Dade County, because they asked me what we could do to get better. And my answer was, listen, when I was on the U.S. Conference of Mayors Board, the business community in every major city in this country, and even around the world, but in this country, has a say and participates. And the minute the business community does not participate and gives of that space, even to the politicians, because politicians, trust me, don't have all the answers. They could not. There's no way that any politician, even on this county commission, and they're great friends of mine and they're very intelligent, but we don't have all the answers. We certainly are not going to know more about trade with Brazil than both of you in the chamber. And what we should do if we want to improve trade with Brazil is go to you, not necessarily just recreate the wheel and believe that we can just do it ourselves. So I think the business community in Miami-Dade County has and should continue to be more insistent on being part of the process. And as we see so many large business owners move from other parts of the country because just of the tax structure and other things that happen in Florida and here in Miami-Dade County, I think they should take a greater role because, as Dade County becomes more of a finance center than we were, for example, then certainly a guy like Mr. Griffin should be more involved. And I've had the opportunity to meet him, and that's one of the things I've told him. Politicians need to listen. I'm never going to know enough about finance, as much in finance as he does, neither does anybody in county government, but we can certainly use his talents. And I think that's important because time and talent are really critical.
Yeah, the thing about having all the answers as we're growing up, we realize we know less and less.
Yes.
Look back at my parents, I always thought that they knew everything. Whatever it is, ask dad, ask mom, they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Turns out we never know what we're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, to your point, I think having that engagement, having that proximity just adds a lot of value to building the future. And in that spirit, what do you think are the main opportunities at the county level for businesses to collaborate or to invest in along with the government?
Well, one of the things that we're trying to do, and they gave me a committee called the Government Efficiency and Transparency Committee. I call it the GET Committee because we can get you, right? But the bottom line with that, it's kind of they gave me a lemon, so we made a lemonade. And what I've done is gone to the private community and asked them how can we improve our procurement, for example, which has been traditionally a headache. People get awarded a contract and then it takes them 3 years to get the contract, started, which doesn't make any sense. But also beyond our procurement, the fact that the building permitting, the ability to work with the business community on housing, which is a critical need, anything that's quality of life oriented, our committee is tackling. And my goal is to streamline it and make it more efficient. And certainly, I think the way the business community can help is be involved in the process. I was just talking to a developer who is actually here in Miami. He's been texting me a lot. I gotta let him know when he can come to one of our meetings. And I said, come and tell me these things in public. Don't tell me in private. Tell me in public so I can come up with some legislation that we can turn into a change. We have a project right now which really came out of our office that everybody now is supporting, which is logical. It's our county entered into an agreement with the federal government almost 30 years ago because of grease and other things going into our water and sewer system and going into the bay. Well, things have changed, and that was 30 years ago. A lot of things have happened, and we have an agreement, and I'd like to change it, not the whole agreement, but I want to change the part that they call it the FOG. Because it includes grease traps and food, but the most important thing about it is that restaurants are having to pay $100,000 for a grease trap that don't have food. They just do shakes. For a small business person, that's not logical.
Yeah.
And you should hear the horror stories that I've gotten. So we had a meeting and we had people come. We had a gentleman fly in from Raleigh, North Carolina, who has a number of restaurants that he's opening and says, can we do something about this? Because anytime we increase the cost of doing business with regulation in Dade County, we impact jobs and we impact businesses. And a small business, you buy a restaurant or a kiosk. We heard a story from International Mall. A kiosk is getting charged ridiculous amount and telling them, well, we need this paperwork and they got to show it. And usually malls have large grease traps, right? Mm-hmm. And they don't get billed. A little kiosk can't pay $50,000, $60,000 for that. So, and we see people taking 27 months, 30 months no, that can't happen. You usually are given 6 months, maybe if your landlord is beneficial and says, I'm going to give you a break, but you got to move in after 6 months. And time is money. So that's an example of where I think the businesses can be involved. And I'll be honest with you, the minute my colleagues saw, and the mayor of the county saw, that all these businesses were showing up and saying, hey, we've got a problem, they
made a difference.
They made a big difference. And legislation is coming out of that now in a couple of months because we're waiting for a report from the administration, which is a 60-day report. And then we're going to proffer a bunch of legislation because, a large, 500-person restaurant is not the same as somebody who's got a Jamba Juice place in a strip center. Can't treat them all the same.
Well, moving a little more into the Brazilian business community, which has a big impact in the local economy, be it hospitality, be it logistics, aviation, entrepreneurship, and many other areas. How do you see the contributions of the Brazilian business community to the county?
Well, Brazil was key in making us an international city and county. And I use the word city county, but it's really Miami-Dade County because the city of Miami proper is about not 500,000 people. But the Brazilian Chamber of Commerce was critical for that, and the trade with Brazil was critical. And not only for the state of Florida, but for the county. So the way that I see it, we need to continue to grow it. Miami, many times in Miami-Dade County, we're proud of being the capital of the Americas. I'm now the vice chair of the International Trade Commission, which deals a lot with the chambers and with businesses. Precisely, the other day we had a bunch of members from the European Union that were here talking about, believe it or not, garbage. But one of those things, so chambers like yours, and in particular the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce, which is very important, the trade with Brazil is, you guys will probably know the numbers better than I would, but Brazil is one of our top trade partners. And as you said, Carlos, in many different industries. So the way that I look at it, it's not just a matter, yes, it's cultural, which is wonderful, but it's also jobs. Because every time a Brazilian company opens up here, it's jobs here. And by the way, every time a company from here does trade in Brazil, it's jobs here and there. Yeah. So it impacts people, and that sometimes is forgotten by people when they talk about economic development. It really is about jobs. It's not just about, hey, taxes and money and this. It's about jobs, and that makes a big difference. So I would expect us to continue as a state and also as a county to make Brazil continue to work with not only with the chamber, but to continue to focus on Brazil, which is obviously one of the most powerful countries in the world, as a great trade partner for Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, you mentioned the trade, and actually we have the numbers for like the past 30 years.
Yeah.
Brazil has been the largest trading partner
Right.
of the state of Florida for over 30 years. Last year, interestingly, Brazil was the country that Florida exported the most, and
Yeah.
that has been the case for
Yeah.
over 2 decades also. But not only was the country number one that Florida exported the most to, but it was the first time in, I think, also 20, 30 years that it was the country that exported to Florida the most
Right.
as well. So it was both ways this time. So Brazil was usually like the second, third, or fourth
Yeah.
country that most exported to Florida. Last year was number one on both. So that was very interesting.
The funny thing is you should mention it's that long, because one of the important things is, and I mentioned it before, the growth of Miami-Dade County. And I want to really applaud both of you guys for this. The growth of Miami-Dade County, in large part, took place because of international trade. And Brazil was one of the first countries to see that. Other countries now are starting to see it. And some saw it maybe 10 years ago, some maybe 15. But truthfully, Brazil was one of the first, if not the first country to see that. Other countries have come afterwards, including obviously in Latin America or in Central America, but Brazil was one of the first to see it. So that's very commendable. It's been a natural partnership for so long that I really see that the only thing we can do is grow it, hopefully.
Right.
Switching gears a little bit towards infrastructure, thinking more about future plans. Now that Florida is getting a lot more attention naturally because of the way it's being led and the policies, which is good for business, and we see more and more capital being attracted, especially to South Florida. Infrastructure needs to change. It needs to evolve. It needs to,
Right.
with any growth spurts, you need to make adjustments. What do you see in terms of PPPs that could connect the Brazilian business community even further with the government?
Well, I think anything that has to do with infrastructure is probably in large part going to be something we're going to look at. We're doing it now with the waste facility, and there's a Spanish company there and a local company, FPL. But truthfully, government, especially in Florida, with some of the changes potentially in the tax structure, the only way to grow, and it's not just in Florida, by the way. There's a lot of older cities up north that need public-private partnerships to really be able to deal with some of their infrastructure deficits. The state of Indiana began it with an entity in Spain. Because the roads need to be built, and that in that example, but it could be anything. It could be power, it could be energy, et cetera. So I think that that's just a natural evolution. And when the state changed its laws and the county changed its laws to allow for that. Now, the interesting part about it is obviously it has to make sense for everybody. Because the discussion we've had here, which has not happened, is some sort of process in the Rickenbacker Causeway, which everybody knows needs some work. No matter our budget is extensive, it's a $12 billion budget. It's very big, and our airport and our port probably make up about 15% of the economy of the state, not only of the employees of the state, economy of the state. But having said that, it has to make sense for both sides. And from the public policy perspective, what we want is stability and guarantees that things will be done and done the right way. And from the private side, nobody wants to go into, despite what everybody says, there's no such thing as a free lunch, okay? Never has, never will. That's why the country where I come from, hopefully there'll be change. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. There's no power because nobody's worked on the power grid for 60 plus years.
It's only natural.
That's the reality of life, and there are no things. There's just no free lunch, and so I think that's going to be. I think in the future, that is the logical way for local governments to always explore, as opposed to just growing in numbers because just there comes a point where not everything needs to grow just from the public policy side.
I agree, and I for one, I would love to see the train go all the way down to Florida City. I think that would make traffic a lot better, and specifically towards that southern part of the county. And also going west on 88. I think, and the reason I highlight west on 88 is because you've got the junction of the train stations along with 88, as well as possibly buildable areas on top, in the middle actually of 88 all the way west, right? So that I think would definitely make a difference.
Yeah, we looked at that, and you touched a great point, which is transportation, because every great community has to deal with transportation, healthcare, education, which is also very important. And I think that the transportation issue has always been a tough one for all of South Florida. It really is a tri-county issue now. It's no longer just a county issue. But the reality is that a mile of Metro Rail costs $1 billion. So it's not that now we had discussions with some of the light rail companies that have traditionally had those rights, as you mentioned, down coming down even 836. And I think we got to think out of the box, but we got to be realistic. We've seen some changes in the Bright Line corridor. They did some stuff with us to get up to the Aventura Mall, which is good. It's separate from Brightline. This is the part of one of the northeast corridors. And the reality is that there's just not going to be enough money in the federal government at this point. We haven't seen a gigantic infrastructure bill. We had one now under the most recent administration, but it wasn't nearly as big as what happened under Eisenhower, which was really the last time this country saw
a major push.
Push, because we've seen bridges falling in Minnesota, for example, and the infrastructure of the country needs to be looked at. And certainly here in South Florida, we're cognizant of that. And look, part of our growth, we're always going to have traffic, and traffic and transit are two different things, but we're going to have traffic. That comes with growth. Anybody who's been to Sao Paulo knows that, you grows, you got to really understand that that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing necessarily. No, it depends on how you deal with it, and you just want to be able to provide for all.
Yeah, it's a reality of life. You already mentioned some of them, but what are some of the policies or other policies that you are directly working on that will impact the residents, the business communities, and future investments here in Miami-Dade County?
Yeah, I think one of the two things the one we're working obviously, we talked about the GET committee and reforming government, which that in itself is a very, very difficult thing to do, because you're not just moving other elected officials or mayor, you're moving the whole bureaucracy that exists around government, which is not easy to move, by the way. So let's be clear. And it's like plugging a hole and then another one pops open. But we're trying, and that's what we're going to try to continue to do. Housing is very important. I'm on the housing committee now, and housing, I think, affordability. It's a national issue. Affordability is an issue. Let's be realistic. We want our kids, our grandkids to stay in this state if they can, and not to have to leave somewhere else. But there's a lot of affordability issues in a lot of major cities in this country also. As land gets more expensive, we have the Everglades on one side, and then we have the Bay on the other. We don't have the luxury of areas like maybe Dallas or Houston, where you got planes that you can grow still and go out. So we have to, the affordable, and by the way, one of the things, and I know it's a little bit controversial, so I'll mention it now. Sometimes the environmentalists get on my case about this, but I really do think that, we're the only county that has an urban development boundary, and rightly so, because you shouldn't build in the Everglades, even though Broward did, but that's okay. Yeah, but to do this piecemeal like we're doing it for the last 52 years only makes the politicians happier because they get campaign donations. It doesn't make anybody else happier. It's not good for the developers. It's not good for the environmental community. It's not good really for those policymakers that care. It was never intended to be a permanent site. And in this community, we have to have not only apartments and condos, townhomes and homes, but, our children need to be able to raise a family here. And not everybody wants to live, in a downtown setting. Some want to live out west, like I do, and I think that it's important as we look at these questions that everybody come to the table. It shouldn't be a bad word in government to bring everybody to the table. If anybody, and I said this to a lady from the other day on an issue that we had, which to me made no sense. There's already businesses there, and it's not in the Everglades. It was supported by the Miccosukee who are in the Everglades, South Florida Water Management. But it became, well, I say no to everything. I said, well, if you say no to everything, then you put me in a very bad spot, because my role as a representative of the community is to represent the whole community. I can't do that, not with the developers, not with you, which is the environmental community. Now, if you come with some logical arguments, you're probably going to win them. Because I want to protect our water. I want to protect the Everglades. I mean, by law, we have to protect them. But it's not like we don't. I want to live here. You still need clean water. You need the lights that work. You don't want to be the example I just gave you. A country that doesn't put money into, or a county that doesn't put money into infrastructure. But you've got to come to the table. You can't have that attitude. And I think that we got to put that aside in this county, where we're so stuck in our ways that we refuse to talk about potentially even how it could be a little bit different.
I clearly remember my wife, Claudia, when she was in local government together with you, mentioning these words. It's funny how common sense is not that common anymore.
It is. It is not. Common sense is not that common, and it's unfortunate, because, and I do believe that the pendulum will swing. I do believe that democracy is based on the middle. And not based on, and we have so much information today, which is great. With great information, we got a lot more, but it's also negative sometimes, because sometimes he or she who yells the loudest sometimes gets heard more. And trust me, unfortunately on the commission, sometimes I'm kind of the bearer of bad news, who says things that maybe they don't like to hear. But the reality is, we're there we should be there, and I'm there to do good for the community. This is a legacy that you leave. It's that you don't do it for the money, because the private sector is more lucrative. It's a question of doing it because it's the right thing to do. And I think that sometimes my colleagues, sometimes I remind them, before you bring something, try to take a look at it from all perspectives. And try, at the county, it's going to be a difficult budget year this year at the county. I was just talking to the nonprofits. It's going to be a bad year. There's going to be change in Tallahassee. It's going to be a bill that's going to be voted on property taxes. On our taxes that we pay on our homes. I don't want to say all of our property taxes that we pay because that's another issue that costs a lot of money too. Because I pay more to my insurance company than I pay in property taxes to the county. But we'll talk about and that's an affordability issue too.
It is,
and that's a statewide issue. It's not a county issue. It's a statewide issue. Yeah. But so it's gonna be a tough year, and I tell all the nonprofits, we must be reasonable. We must be reasonable. If you take an attitude, it's my way or the highway, then as a colleague of mine said yesterday, he reminded the nonprofit community, because he calls them the T-shirt crowd, because everybody's got the name of their nonprofit when they come during the budget cycle. It's going to be a tough year, and we're going to have to make tough decisions. And the best way to do this is to do it collectively, but be reasonable.
That's always the hard part, right? It's finding the common ground. At least at this day and age, we're just talking about this before, as we were preparing. The sense of agreeing to disagree, kind of went away. At least in the last, I want to say maybe the last decade, that's kind of been seen less and less.
Right. I think that what's happened with that is, and I was actually talking to my youngest daughter, who's 15, about to be 16, and one of the things. I think that whatever you want to call it, the internet, social media, whatever, you really got to go through your news. And both of you are on the front lines with the Chamber of Commerce of business in South Florida. But the reality is that somebody out there who's never had a business can have a program, and they're commenting on it, as some have approached me, and they're making comments that people are repeating. And I'm like, well, if you repeat a lie often enough, people are going to believe it. And you have to be very careful with that, because while this has been a great tool, I don't mean this particularly, because I love podcasts, like I was telling you guys before, but the whole expanse of the internet, it's also been very dangerous. And I'll give you one example that has really stood out in my profession of law. Artificial intelligence is great, but there's been a couple of lawyers disbarred in Florida for incorrect use of artificial intelligence, because they cited cases that they were wrong on.
It didn't exist, and
it's a problem. So I think everything in life, the Stoics have a saying that everything has two handles, the good part and the bad part, right? And you got to really understand which handle to use, and you really need to look at everything nowadays, especially with information. I'm amazed at sometimes how people tell me things about the county. Even when we were in Doral, people would tell me things. I'm like, well, you're totally wrong. I had one lady that was sitting by me and said, well, the mayor of the city, he's got a helicopter, so he doesn't have to deal with traffic. She was sitting right by me. So I say, with all due respect, I don't want to offend you, but I don't have a helicopter. I do deal with traffic. And by the way, you see that? It's not even a Mercedes. It's an Acura. So please take a look. I have to deal with traffic. and you're driving a Mercedes. So, what am I supposed to presume something? Because no. And it's a shame, but that's what politics, I wouldn't even say politics. I think the
society as a whole.
Yeah.
But I think that came with the evolution of technology, the way we generate and consume data.
Yeah.
As a whole, maybe it's something for maybe the education board to consider having some sort of elective that kind of teaches people on how to deal with data. It's like, okay, you got data, what do you do with it, right? Because you're going to get tons and tons of data, and more so every day, and then you're going to have AI. Like, well, how do you deal with that? How do you check your sources? How do you make sure that what so and so said actually makes any sense? Is it backed by empirical data? I mean, reputable sources. Not everyone does their homework. So having that maybe is something that we need to start kind of finding a way in our educational system. Yeah,
the state approved finally a finance education in high schools, which I think is great because we're talking about data. There's so many Americans and so many Floridians that just we went from a country that really had very few credit cards in 1960 to now probably credit cards make more money off the interest than the credit card than what you'd actually use, and I think that it's important for young men and women to understand that all these things are intertied. They're tied together. They're really finance. If you don't know finances and if you can't keep a checkbook, yes, there is a thing it's called a checkbook for the younger listeners and followers. Then you're gonna have a tough time in life, no matter how much money you make. Because if you don't know what you're spending, where your money's going, and what's most effective in your household, it's going to be tough to get to the next step. And that's part of the affordability crisis also.
No, it is.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. We could continue here for hours.
That's right. I mean, this is fun. Commissioner, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend time with us and tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing and how we can get more involved as a community and help drive the future.
Definitely. And I thank you both and the Chamber for having me as a guest. And I'll make sure I reach out to both of you how you can get more involved. And know that I'll speak for my district, District 12, but as one of the county commissioners, it's important to me to hear your voice and for you to be a part of the process. So I'll keep you guys, anything that pops up that's important, I'll be more than happy to, even the one that's not important, like the opening of a new park, so you can always enjoy it. But,
sure, why not?
And the World Cup, I'm not going to talk about that. Good luck in the World Cup. That's all I can say.
Well, Honorable Commissioner and my dear friend JC, it is always a pleasure to see you. It's great to see you again.
Likewise,
I want to thank you for being here, and I also want to thank our audience for watching us and let them know that we have a lot of upcoming events here in our chamber. I have to pull out my cheat sheet because we have a lot of things coming up, but we have a business card exchange. We're recording this in mid-March, just so that you know if you're watching, but on April 1st, we have our business card exchange. We have a recycling day on April 4th that we're organizing for people who want to recycle electronics. And we also have an exclusive roundtable that we're doing with the Federal Reserve on April 8th, which is going to be very interesting. It's the second one that we're doing. Yeah. We did the first one last year, was very informational. We have a membership virtual networking event that we're going to do on April 24th. We have committee lunches all throughout the months, and we have our first round of the roadshow coming up in May and our second round of the roadshow coming up in August. And then we have a bunch of other ones, but for those who want to get more information, they can visit our website, brazilchamber.org. You can sign up for our newsletter, and you also find the link to our LinkedIn, to our Facebook, to our Instagram, and obviously you're watching us on Facebook or listening to us in Spotify. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you again at our next BACCF podcast series. Thanks,
Thanks, everyone.